One of the benefits I have of doing so many of these mock interviews week after week is that, well, quite frankly, I'm getting to utilize my superpower. Superpower, you say? What is that? Well, it turns out my superpower is pattern matching. And while it is absolutely terrible for parties, saving the universe, maybe I could have seen what Thanos was going to do and snap his fingers, not really sure I had any other powers to prevent it. It's really only good at kind of taking in a bunch of data and seeing things others don't. So what does that mean for you? Well, in the context of your interview answers, all of these folks that come to me looking for help preparing for their interviews, and we do these mock interviews, they're supposed to feel real. And what I'm seeing is the same thing over and over again. Here's what it is, and it's really simple. As a candidate, you're trying to do too much. You're trying to tell too much of the story all at once in the context of your answer. And I don't mean that you're talking for too long, though that is a real problem that people have, and they just talk and on and on and on. That's not the problem. The problem is you're trying to fit everything that you believe I need to understand about whatever that situation is at work, that story that you're trying to tell. You're trying to put all of the information into that story. When you do this, you are causing three very, very specific and avoidable problems that you really don't want to have to hit in your interview. Number one, you are overloading me, the interviewer, completely overloading me. I don't know what's important. I don't, because unless you and I have worked at the same company with a lot of shared experiences, I'm trying to stitch together what you're telling me based on what you're telling me and how you're telling me and the words you're using to tell me. I'm trying to create the same film strip in my mind that you're seeing when you're telling the story, right? We've all been there. You're telling a story and you're literally like visually in the back of your brain, you're seeing images from all these different scenes play out. I haven't seen that movie. So yeah, my superpower is pattern matching and I'm going to be able to fill in the gaps better than most people. But for the most part, an interviewer who's hearing all this, they won't be able to stitch that story together. They'll be completely overwhelmed with all of this extra information that's coming at them, and they're going to shut down. They're going to shut down, right? Because they only have so much cognitive load available to you as a candidate in the 1 hour that you have together. And if you overload them and you basically are saying, I don't know how to communicate what's important or what's effective, what's required for this discussion, they're just going to get up and walk out of the room at the end of the interview and be like, well, no, I don't want to work with that person because they can't communicate, or they talk too much, or they don't get to the point, or any number of ways that they would say that, which is you overloaded them. Number two, you really need to edit yourself. Like cut down on the content, right? It's one thing to overload me, the interviewer, just a bunch of stuff, and I'm trying to pattern match against, some story you're telling me, but not all of the stuff is important, right? I talk all the time about my STAR fact format where it's, it's STAR, sure, situation, task, action, result, but using an FAQ format to create your answers. But the purpose of doing that is to get to the essence of the questions that matter. Not all of the questions matter. You don't need to answer every possible permutation of question that might come from telling your story to me, the interviewer. The thing that I say over and over again to my customers is, I don't need to be an expert in your job to determine if you're very good at doing your job, right? And so because of that, you don't need to overload me with the information, but you also don't need to just come at me with all this extra information. Focus on the things that matter the most for the context of that story. And finally, this is kind of the hidden gem here. If you are going to overload me and come at me as the interviewer with a bunch of superfluous information and it's just too much, you're answering all the questions, you're providing all the background material, all of the context, everything that I might need to know about what happened in the past to talk about what you did, then about the results, you're not facilitating a conversation. You're not facilitating a conversation. That's what you want the interview to be. You want it to feel like two people who already work together. You want me to walk out of that room thinking, oh man, that is awesome. Or she's amazing. She communicates well. She handles problems well. She's very empathetic as a leader. Like, I get it. We had a great conversation. Rare is it the case that somebody walks home from a social interaction or gets on the bus or whatever. Right? They come home from a social interaction and they're relating it to their partner sitting together. Like, yeah, I met this amazing person that just talked at me for an hour and didn't let me communicate with them at all or ask any clarifying questions. They basically talked to me for an hour and they were amazing. The only way that happens is if generally I signed up for that, meaning I paid for, I'm going to some speaker event, I want to go see somebody speak in public that I really want to hear, and then I'll sit there for an hour and get that, right? That is the value of a keynote session at a conference. But if you're out in a social situation and you're at one of those conferences, you've just come from a great keynote, right? I don't particularly, Gary Vee's not my guy, but hey, Gary Vee, great keynote. He knows how to deliver a keynote. And when he's done, he comes off stage and all the people in the audience, They go to the bar and they're all hanging out. Who are you more likely to have a good interaction with, a memory of a good interaction with? The person you had a conversation with, or the person who basically Gary V'd you for the next hour and they just talked at you, bro? You got to hustle, bro. They get to just create 10,000 pieces of content an hour, bro. If they talk at you, it's the same thing as a candidate doing that. When you overload me, when you talk at me, when you provide all this extraneous and you haven't edited yourself at all, you're not facilitating the conversation. And when I get up and walk out of that room, do I want to work with you? Probably not.